Welcome to Desert Wanderers, produced by Salt and Light Radio. If you're new here, we bridge the gap between you and the person in the pew next to you. I will be interviewing priests, religious, and laity in our local Boise diocese, asking questions that'll help you navigate your vocation and help build community wherever you are with whatever resources you may have. Let's build the city of God together. Welcome, Brad. I'm so excited to have you on today. How are you?
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, Natalie. Thank you for inviting me on to your show. Yeah, this is
Absolutely.
exciting.
I'm so excited to have you on. First, we just wanted to get to know you and to get to know your community better. So, knowing that I speak with individuals about their vocational story, I'd love to hear yours. So, I guess let's start at the beginning. So, where did you grow up? What were you raised Catholic? Those kinds of questions.
Yeah. So I was born and raised. Well, I was born in Clarkston, Washington, but from the beginning, I've lived in Kamiah, Idaho, on a little native Indian reservation of the Nez Perce Indians, and graduated from Kamiah High School in '96, and spent 9 years in college and the university. And yeah, my parents were both Catholic. We grew up going to mass and every Sunday, and that was kind of the extent of my faith as a child was mass on Sundays, and we did some Wednesday night youth group stuff, but not really a whole lot beyond that. And then I went to college at University of Idaho and did a little time at University of Hawaii, and then Creighton University, and got my degree and moved back to Kamiah. And so it's been an adventure, but full circle boomerang back to the town I grew up in. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so tell me a little bit more about when you started to take your faith more seriously. So in college, is that when you kind of had a point where you would say, I guess some people call it a reversion. I feel like I had a reversion in college. So, or
I
when
think
did
that's
you
where I
use that?
tested my faith. I think I think in college is really where you test truth, and I think once people want to know truth and they ask questions about it, it leads you to God. And so, it's one thing to be told that you're of a faith, and then another one to discover it to be the truth for yourself. And I think that is my journey, was testing it, and then ultimately strengthening it by finding out that it's truth, and God's truth is not penetratable. And then once you move back and start having children, you begin to really dig into what God's intentions are for the family unit, and what you want your children to be taught and learn at a young age. And I think that is part of increasing your spirituality. And in my opinion, it never ends. Your journey of growth is something that you do every day to better yourself as a human being, as a professional, as a husband, as a dad, as a friend, as a worker, as a Christian, as a human being. You strive to refine yourself, and in this process, I think, God throws curveballs, or humans throw curveballs at you that test you, and those are important times to strengthen your faith that much more. So, I mean, I would say since COVID, my strength has really gotten much better, and I'm grateful for each day God gives me to learn more about Him and Him learn more about us, right?
What were you doing during this period of testing? Like, how were you growing closer to your faith?
Well, I think that you you are given blessings in your life that you have to recognize as blessings along the way, and that opens the door. And one being, family, and my children and my wife. And so as you go along each day, there's a whole lot that you can see that is not a coincidence. I do not believe in coincidence. I think it's all God incidents. And so we take those blessings and know that we are to utilize them in a way to show the goodness to other people. And you know, what does God say? You are the light of the world. And so you begin to see the darkness in the world, or you know, once you know Christ, you know Antichrist. But you do not know Antichrist without knowing Christ. And so you can apply and overlay what you see in society with the Word of God and how they're intertwined today. And I think it's a readily apparent picture for people who love God to see the fallen world that we're living in.
What was it like going to church in Idaho versus Hawaii and then back in, I guess, Idaho. So I mean like College of Idaho, University of Idaho versus the University of Hawaii and then coming back to your parish here. Did you see any differences when you were at the different parishes?
Yeah, I think that there's little differences, you know. Some of the cultural norms, like in Hawaii, it was a lot more laid back. You took your shoes off, and you know, and it was, and each one had wonderful differences, but they were minor, you know. I guess focusing on the sacrifice at the altar and Jesus's journey to the cross at each mass was real similar, but I think um, there's differences in the atmosphere of belief, so to speak, at different places. Although you know, Hawaii was really joyous too. The Midwest was joyous. Lots of great, beautiful Catholic churches out in the Midwest, and on every block it seemed like, and people of faith, and so I think more than the difference in the church was kind of the subcultural differences in this country, and realizing how vast America is, and sometimes people get excited to go to other countries when I think just traveling around our own country really shows you cultural differences as well. And so that would probably be the greater differentiation is just the difference in the people. Yeah.
Yeah. I can attest to that. I really enjoyed living in North Carolina when I went to college there. I went to Belmont Abbey. And I had to say there is a little bit of a cultural shift compared to Idaho. I definitely think um I grew up a little more self-sufficient than what was expected or in North Carolina. I feel like there's a lot of chivalry that I didn't necessarily know in Idaho, and just general um kind and kindness and it's not the word I'm looking for though. Like hospitality. Yeah, hospitality. They're very
Yeah. Southern
yeah, hospitable.
hospitality. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
The Southern hospitality is definitely noticeable
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely. And then so
And
so you said that before you came back to Kamiai where you live now, when did you meet your wife?
when I was in dental school at Creighton University.
Okay.
And so he was going through assisting program to be a hygienist was her goal. And then just by sheer happenstance that I needed an assistant to be certified for boards, and her teacher had gave me her phone number and said she was willing to help me, and that's how I met her. And so she helped me for boards, and her teacher said I should take her out to dinner as well. So that's how we met. And
So
yeah,
her
kind
teacher
of
set
just
you guys up.
yeah. You could
Was
say
she
that.
Catholic?
Yeah, she was. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so then
Yes.
does she work with you now? Because you're a dentist now, correct?
Yes, I'm a dentist. Uh-huh. Been doing it for 18 years. She worked with me for a while. She worked with me at the prison and at the tribe. So there's a little tribal clinic here in Kamiah, and she assisted me there. And then she would go to the prison with me and assist me there. And then, you know, once we started having children, she shifted to being a homemaker and working long, hard days ever since. And so now she does that full time and doesn't go to the office anymore. But yeah, she we have 7 children, so she stays very busy.
I was gonna say I appreciate the long, hard days.
Oh,
I know
yes.
that this is like more common in Catholic circles that, the idea of having a home and being a stay-at-home mom is like more valued. But it is true that they're long and hard and never ending. So I appreciate that.
Oh, it's multiple hats, right? I mean, she's the homemaker, the cook, the cleaner, the launderer, the educator, the nurse, the support travel, the right. She's at school right now picking the kids up in Grangeville. So we live 30 miles from the Catholic school that our children go to, and we drive back and forth there multiple times a day to pick them up. And then as soon as she gets home, the older kids are in high school sports, so she'll be going to a volleyball game another hour and a half away in another town, and then I'll take the younger kids and we'll go to wrestling practice. And so we just mix and do lots of traveling, and it's a joy for each child in our life, and there's work that you put into it. And to be honest with you, I think it's amazing how God made woman special, and to watch someone embrace that role with a smile and know that it's 24/7. It really it shows how fortunate we are to have the women of God in our lives, and I married the most wonderful lady imaginable. So I love my wife very much. Yes, yes,
I met her briefly and she was wonderful. So I'll just say, from the short moment that I met her, she was very pleasant and beautiful. So good job.
yeah.
But
Thank
okay,
you.
so
Yeah,
then you have 7 kids, right? So what are your ages of your 7 kids?
correct. A son who's a junior in high school, he's 16. Daughter who's a freshman, she'll be 15 next month. A son who's a seventh grader that will be 13 next month. A daughter in sixth grade who's 11. A son in second grade who's 8. A son in kindergarten who is 5, and a daughter who is 1.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. That's a great span. How do you feel like you
It is
guys
amazing.
adjust to the age difference in parenting?
Well, I think that there is no manual, and God made every individual unique, and so you kind of have to tailor the personality to the parenting a little bit, and then trial and error. So I think the first kids always got it the hardest. They have all focus on them and a constant reinforcement of the standards, and by the time you're on number 7, you've spent so much of your time on the first 6 that number 7 just kind of has to fall in line and probably has it a little easier, I would guess. But she sticks right to her mama's hip, and I think for being one, that's what they all have done. But the difference in children, and I think it's interesting that there's a difference in what number they are born, and
Really?
so
Explain that.
personalities take shape. I think that personalities take shape based upon the voids that children see in the family and what is needed. And so they kind of jump in and go, I'll take on that role. Maybe it's being more funny or being more helpful or being a leader and standards or being more independent. But they definitely, I think, have a little bit of psychological aspect to what number of child there is. And I can't prove that or disprove it, but I do think that there's something to be said for that.
I have to say, being the baby, I definitely think all my siblings would call me the spoiled one. So I think that's probably true.
Yeah,
To
yeah,
not
yeah, I
want to
can relate with that.
yeah. So, okay, so another question I have, being that I only have 2 kids, we are expecting our third. And so, a good question I think I would have for you
Congratulations.
on, um, next would be, with having so many kids, how have you like spent time with each one of them and like tried to, you know, be Christ to each one of your children? I guess that's a question I have as a parent.
Well, I think that comes from balance in your life. It's really important to have time every day for your spouse, time every day for your children, and obviously your work and for God. to incorporate all that into the day. And balance, I think, gives people joy in their life. And in our society where there's so much happening so fast, sometimes we lose that balance, and you can get a sense of it when you're not in balance and your joy isn't as much. And so, it's a constant recalibration of needs and trying to meet them all, but truly having time for all the above is important on a daily basis. And that's not just as a dentist, but even to the staff I work with, and
Hmm.
making sure that they are homemakers and wives and mothers, and finding time for them to also fulfill those other roles in their family, because that's more important than the work that they do at the office. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a balancing act, and it's definitely something that takes practice and time management, right? You only have so much time in a day, and it seems to be a lot more on the plate than what you can bite off in a daily basis, and realizing what priorities are for the day, right? And I guess you learn to live in the moment, right? When you have so much going on, then you learn to not worry about things that are put too far off, and to just enjoy each day and each moment, and take on the duties from morning to night with a smile, and do the best you can, right? It's not perfect
Yeah.
by any means, but to find happiness doing whatever you are in the moment, and that is the biggest key, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you and your wife sit down and try to schedule that out? I know that, I don't know if you've ever listened to Matt Fradd's podcast, but I remember listening once and I thought this might be a good piece of advice. My husband and I have yet to do it, but they sit down once a year and basically plan out their month or their months, like the whole year. And they basically say like, where did we succeed this last year? Where did we fail? How can we do better? And like try to implement in the next year. But then they also make time for being like, okay, so this month, since they have what I think it's 4 kids, they do this month, we're gonna do this family activity, and then this child, we're gonna take this week to do something special with them. Like mom's gonna do something special one-on-one and dad's gonna do something. I've always thought that was a great idea. But is there any like practical ways that you and your wife get together to like help manage your family and your home life?
Yeah, we have a master schedule in our house, and so it's a whiteboard, and it's got stuff on it every day, and there's things from chores to entertainment to obligations, and we live so remote that it's a lot of travel time, and I think we get a lot of time with our children, one on one, two on one, three on one, just based upon the activities. And then sometimes we'll definitely take dates and go, okay, let's take this one and go have a little bit of time. But we try to manage that to give them their individual uniqueness time. It's not, we don't have a year schedule. It's more a month at a time. I go next month, and we're definitely people who keep our kids in activities and extracurriculars so that they can push themselves and kind of learn time management, and learn how really life can be uncomfortable at times, and to find joy in that. And so, I mean, for example, today she'll drive, a couple times to Grangeville and back. And I drove to Grangeville this morning and back, and she's going back there. She drove to Nespers. So there's another town where our children go to high school. And then based upon the activities tonight, I will drive all the way to Moscow. And so, I mean, if we
Wow.
added and she'll drive to Timberline, I would equate that the same as driving from Boise to Moscow today.
Wow.
So between the two of us, we will be in the car 5 hours, 6 hours today,
Wow.
driving children to their activities, and giving them opportunities to challenge themselves and better themselves. And so that's a big part of what we do. And then we live on a little farm and have some chickens, and they have some chores, and so it's every day, but definitely not a yearly planning. It's day to day and month to month. This summer we took a 30-day road trip across the United States, and hit the East Coast, 9 of us in a Suburban, and gave them opportunities to see part of the rest of America and really hopefully to see how fortunate they are to live where we live here in a nice little utopian idealized town of Cami, Idaho.
I have two questions. The first one, do you guys homeschool at all?
No, we've never homeschooled. They all went to Catholic school through eighth grade. St. Peter and Paul ends in eighth grade,
Oh, okay.
and
Is that
and
why they have to
so
go to high school in Nez Perce?
no, they have a town. They have a school here too, but we kind of let our children choose. I was hoping that they would go to St. John Bosco, but it really we must be the light of Christ and take that torch everywhere we go in life. And so, if you give them a solid foundation, you hope that they can carry that torch and enhance other people's light as well. And they've chosen Nez Perce. It's a really nice little school with a lot of opportunities for the kids, and that's where my dad grew up, and so I enjoy taking them there and watching them be a part of that little school and community. And like I said, that school is a top-notch school for Idaho, and they push their kids to high standards and have small class sizes and lots of opportunities, and so that's where the oldest two have chosen to go so far.
So I have another question then to follow up with that. So it sounds like you have kind of your family spread out into a couple of different communities. So how do you guys build a Catholic, like how have you guys spent time building a Catholic community where you're at or where your kids are going to school?
Well, I mean, I think our church in Cami, our St. Catherine of Siena, is the most wonderful little parish ever, and our priest is extra special. Father Bruno from Nigeria has brought a tremendous amount of spirit to our church and to our community, and I think you can feel it. You can see the unity that he has brought and the gratitude to be here, and it's been contagious to this community. So my wife did youth group for a long time. She taught a Wednesday night youth group for about 10 years, and that was really a wonderful thing. And then once she had enough kids and somebody else had asked to take it over, she stepped back from that. But that was part of trying to bring Christ to people. And fascinating, a lot of the kids that came to our youth group weren't tied to church. They didn't go to
Oh,
our church. In
wow.
fact, some of them didn't go to any church. And she would make them meals at night and talk to them about things. And so she has a special way with children to be called to her, and it showed by the kids who were showing up on those Wednesday nights, and how a lot of them came from families that weren't together or were broken, or uh, they didn't necessarily have that glue and unity and structure and guidance, and the kids were yearning for it. And so directly, I would say that was one way that we were able to bring it to that community. And then in Grangeville, I'm on a school board at St. Peter and Paul, and so we help guide the big picture with Father Anthony, and he's another wonderful
Mhm.
priest, and we're very grateful for him as well. And he's also from Nigeria, and I find that fascinating. That we live in a time in which we're being sent, I think, absolutely fantastic priests from all the way across the world to integrate into our culture, and for us to learn from them and their culture as well. And
Yeah.
that brings up some interesting, you know, points in conversations that I think we have done some foreign things in our country, and at times I think have been in danger of being lukewarm in our faith. And so having people who are spiritually as strong as they are sent to us is once again not a coincidence. That's a God incidence, and so that's been huge.
I definitely agree with you, but I also think that it's a call for us too to, as US citizens to try to kind of revitalize the faith so that we can have good seminarians and send out missionaries too. I think that that's um something I hope to see. And I know that Idaho's doing a pretty good job. We actually have quite a few seminarians right now. that are really solid. Father Nelson, or not Nelson, Father Nathan is doing a really good job at
Nathan
the new
Dial, yeah,
ministry.
yeah, Father Nathan Dial, he's incredible as well. And he
Yeah,
was in Lewiston for a while. That's where my mom lives, and I've been to some of his masses. But yeah, he is incredible. And obviously Bishop Peter has done a great job of leading the
absolutely.
flock of Idaho.
Yeah,
And so we have so much to be grateful for as a Catholic faith in Idaho.
absolutely.
Cottonwood, another neighboring town where St. John Bosco is, I don't know what it is per capita, but they've pumped out a few priests out of that town.
They're
And
really
I,
Yeah, they've been producing good Catholics. Their Catholic community is really strong. I know I have a couple of friends that are from there, so I haven't ever visited and I hadn't really ever heard of it. But then most of the people I talk to that I have met from there, even if I don't know them say I don't know them from church, they're all Catholic. So it's kind of crazy that they have such a strong community up there as well. Yeah,
They do, and they even pray. In their public school, they have a fantastic public school, and they have a release time building for Christ, in which kids can go from the public school an hour every other day or whatever it is for that release time, and then before their sporting events, they all pray as a group, as a team in a public school, and I think that is a wonderful example of small town dynamics and keeping the faith going, whether it's a public school or a private school or not. And Cottonwood is a very special Catholic community, no doubt. And you can see it and you can sense it. The unity and the love and the camaraderie of that community is something to take note of, I think.
even if it's not like a Catholic community, I think the benefit of being in a small town is you get away with a lot of things that you wouldn't be able to in a larger community. So even in like Caldwell, you probably wouldn't get, which is smaller like per capita than like Boise, right? You're not going to get away with
Right.
something like praying before a basketball game, right? Someone's going to put a stink up about that. But like I grew up in Payette, and even though it wasn't Catholic, we would all pray before our basketball games, like as a group because there was enough of us that were Christian that we would just pray beforehand. And I know that other teams, like I think New Plymouth also did that and other thing, but it's the thing of being a small town, right? Where you have this flexibility that no one's going to put a stink up if you do that. But I mean, definitely not the praying during school hours. That like wasn't you know, that wasn't common. It wasn't a thing at our
Well, and how did
school.
we get there? Right?
Actually,
How
it's
did
really
we get to
interesting.
that point?
No, it's interesting. So my husband and I actually talked about this well, kind of recently, a couple months ago. But there was court case with Justice Scalia. He did a dissent that's really interesting on why we shouldn't pray in schools. But basically, what happened is, I think there was an atheist student that said he didn't want to he or she, I can't remember if it was a boy or a girl, um, went to court and said that they shouldn't be forced to listen to prayer or to have to pray in school. So it's interesting. If you have time, you should look it up. It's Justice Scalia has a dissent on it, I think. I think he may have agreed with the separation. Oh, I don't remember. Actually, I'm not even going to go into it, but you should read it. It's really interesting. I don't agree with it, and I think
Well,
it
it
could
is
be argued
interesting,
the
and I've
other
read a
way.
little bit too, but I think the separation of church and state from my reading and background was the opposite. Is that there's a separation of church and state, so you can take your God anywhere, and then over time it got flip flop. Think about it. That's why they used to have the Ten Commandments in the schools and the Ten Commandments in the courtrooms, and then all of a sudden it got reversed to the point they packed the Ten Commandments out of the schools and out of the courtrooms when the foundation of it was you could bring Jesus anywhere. And over time, it seemed to have been under attack enough that it created fatigue in the court system, in which it because if you don't want to pray, no one's ever made you pray.
There
If you
are
don't want to pray, you don't pray.
Yeah, the argument is that they shouldn't be forced to hear it, or they shouldn't be forced to be included in a group where they are the odd man out. I think that was the argument for the court ruling. It's actually really interesting my husband's a paralegal, and so he loves reading law documents, and he gives me synopses often. And that one was really interesting, the argumentation. Because and the cool thing about court cases is not everyone agrees, right? So you can like listen to why people agree with it for different reasons. So, like, each judge will have a different reason on why they agree with it, right? But it still passes because they agree, regardless of like what the reason was for them to agree. But it's the same thing with dissents, right? So if a judge dissents on it, it's the same thing. Like their argumentation is different on why they disagree about that certain type of law or whatever. But anyways, I thought it was very interesting. Yeah, I totally recommend it.
Yeah, no, I think it is interesting because we need to understand how we got to where we are in today's society, right? And there is a lot of background necessary to get to that understanding, and then and the more knowledge we have, the more we can approach this to solve our issues today.
Yeah.
Because Jesus died in public for our sins, and we should never be forced to worship Him in private. And I think that it is a love and a joy and an obligation as a Christian to make sure that we aren't scared to pray in public. I don't care if my family goes out to a restaurant to eat, we pray at the restaurant out
Yeah,
loud
absolutely. Yeah.
at dinner. And so it's not something we should be ashamed of. In fact, it's something we should model for others.
And I agree with you, definitely, especially as Catholics, we need to do this often, right? But I think that when it comes to
Right.
the court case was saying that a school entity, so like a state entity can't force kids. But if like kids wanted to start up a group, like I know there was a Christian like Bible study group at my school, at my public school when I was in high school, that got together at lunch every day. And like those things are okay. And if the students lead it, it's fine. Like if our coach was like the one that was leading us in prayer, she would get in trouble. But if we started it, it would have been fine. So I think there is like, so it is like more of a call now as Catholics and as Christians that we need to make sure that we are doing those things because we're allowed to. We just can't, like, the school system can't force it upon students in the morning, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They shouldn't force it upon you, but it should be open. I think it should be even open for teachers and coaches who want to be a part of communal prayer. Why should they be forced to not be a part of something that their free will is engaging them in? And that was tested a few years ago with a football coach in the state of Washington, in which he was fired over praying on the 50-yard line at the end of a game, and he ended up taking it and winning his case because that is something that should be allowed for anybody, regardless of what your title is. If you want to take time to pray and you're not forcing people to do so, there is no harm, and we must allow that in our society, the freedom of worship.
I guess the only thing I would push back, like if I'm going to play devil's advocate with you for a second, the only thing I would say is if you do that for Christianity, you'd have to do the same for like Islam or Buddhism or
They
Hinduism. You'd have
do.
to like
Look at Duke University. They ring their Islam bell for the prayer of the Asan, and people on campus. We don't ring a bell for
the
Christian
liturgy
prayer
of
on
the
public
hours.
campuses.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that we are watching that, and it is actually Christianity that's being suppressed for the rise of all other belief systems.
Sure, and I agree with you. I think I agree with you to a point there. But I guess like if you're talking about a public school system, though you would have to like you'd have to be okay if you let Christianity do that. You'd have to let everyone, basically, no matter what their religion is, to have that practice in whatever class. So like if your kids were in a classroom with a Buddhist. And okay, for example, like if this happened for school kids instead of my situation, but I actually worked for a person who, when we needed good luck, he got all of us Buddhas and then he would want us to rub the Buddha belly. I felt so weird. I was like, I can't do that. So I ended up getting a Mary like statue, like a pregnant Mary statue. And I was like, I'll rub Mary's belly. Like, I'm fine with that. But I mean, like, take that if you were to put it into like a kid system, if your teacher was a Buddhist, right? And was like, okay, we're about to have a test. Everyone grab your Buddhas and rub their belly. Like, you don't have to do it if you don't want to, but like her encouraging the class to do that, you'd have to be okay with those situations too. So, I mean, in a way, like, I agree with you that Christ needs to be engaged in the school. But I also kind of agree with like, if that's the way the world's going, I'd almost rather just like pull my kids out and homeschool them or put them in a good Catholic school, you know? than have to like deal
Well,
with the
there's a lot of
legal.
that going on in Idaho.
Oh,
We live
absolutely.
in an area here
Yeah.
where there's a ton of homeschooled kids and a ton of kids going to Catholic schools. And so, we are witnessing that, but I think part of it comes from the fact that like I'm gonna say that the school system has changed so much that now they are bringing in things that don't belong in school. I might say your point is well taken, but at the same time, they're putting things in that I think parents are concerned about what their children are being taught instead of what they're not being taught. And
Yeah.
anybody can teach them math or English or music or whatever but to start to teach extraneous things that are not of God, and if they're not of God, then they don't belong in school. And maybe even if it is of God, you could take that point that it doesn't belong in school. But my point is that they're bringing in things that are not the
Yeah.
basics of education.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, and I luckily like even in Idaho, I think the beautiful thing about our state so far is that although things are moving, I know last year and there was a lot of pushback, maybe it was the year before about Nampa pulling out a whole bunch of books or banning a whole bunch of books from there, and there was a whole bunch of people for and against it or whatever, right? Or I think the Idaho legislation just made a new law about what books, like if there should be a restricted section for kids under 18 and what books would go in there. If you have like a kids section, what books can go in that. And I think you have to like report um report a book to the library and ask it to be moved, I think is the idea
Well, and
of
I
that
think
law.
the
But
basics of I think a lot of the basis of that has to do with the sexuality that is entered into the books anymore. And where it is very clear that man and woman are together, the dangers of the perverseness in some of the writings anymore is really what has been brought to the attention of concerned parents and wondering why this should even be a topic in schools. And I think even looking at America as a whole, from what I read, in 2007, there was one gender clinic in America. And as of last year, there's over 300. And so is this a natural phenomenon? I'm going to argue it's not. I'm going to argue it's a groomed phenomenon and that it's not something that is healthy for family and traditional values that this country was founded on. And it is the truth of Christ. And because if it's not family based, which is the ultimate unit of God, then it's anti-family based. If it's not procreationism, which is of God, then it's anti-creationism. And you can apply God's rules across uh different aspects of nature. And one of them would be like cattle. We live in an agricultural area, right? And so if you took a bull and you castrate it, does it become a heifer? No, it's a steer. And so when we look at today's society, trying to apply that to children, that is sick and it is evil and it's not normal. And I feel that God is calling us to stand up against these evils, or at the end of the day, we're held as cowards. But to watch innocent children be violated is sickening, and it's disturbing, and it's something that we must fight for the protection of innocence of children. And I'm not saying if you're 40 years old that you don't want to castrate yourself, go ahead. But why are we implicated? Because they're taking your taxpayer dollars to pay for this, to fund it, to educate it, and we stand totally against it. So you're implicated in standing up because you're paying for it.
yeah. I just actually had Jason Everett on. Have you heard any of his stuff? He's been talking and kind of discover or like going down the gender, like he's kind of headlining, I think, a lot of Catholics on how to discuss this topic. But anyways, it was only like 30 minutes, but we had a really good discussion about this. And one of the things I think that he talked about that I think is really important to point out is he said, as of today, when they've done studies, I think the study was done in Australia. I could be wrong. But he was saying of the LGBTQ community there and kids that identifies as trans, 98% had experienced some kind of like childhood trauma, um, that also classifies them for like mental health issues on top of this diagnosis. So his stuff's really interesting. He actually has a really great book called Men or Male, Female, and Other. I haven't finished it, but I did start it and got through the first little bit of it, and it's really, really good and beautiful to talk about these issues and how we should talk about these people, and like the struggles that they're
Well, I
having.
think
One of
he's
the
right.
things he
He's
talks
right
about
that
is the mental health
there
issues and the trauma.
that is absolutely spot on. There has been some sort of incidents that happens in people's lives, and then you follow them through it. You know, you look at the suicide rates
Hmm.
of people in it's like, you know, depending upon what studies you read, it's up to 60 times the suicide rates. And they're screaming for help. And then
Yeah.
in this process, it seems as though we're being educated to perpetuate lies, you know, to tell someone who is created in God's image and likeness that that's actually wrong and that you should go through a genital mutilation process and pretend that you're not of that, and to tell the other kids that they need to apply these principles, that is cowardly and it is a lie. And I think we're obligated to call it out for what it is, and it's a mental health issue that needs addressed from that standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So
sounds like I got some kids in the background. Do you want me to get a more quiet area or
no,
uh
we'll go ahead and just finish up. So
yeah.
awesome. Well, is there anything else that you would like to finish with, or um, anything like if anyone wanted to reach out to you or talk to you, is there any way that they can get a hold of you? Do you have any like social media or anything like that?
You know, I don't do any social media. I'm just kind of old school. That's another one of the barriers to entry into this is I really don't understand technology a whole lot. And so reaching out would be pretty traditional to give me a phone call, or I do have an email, and it's just my name, Brad Schaff at gmail.com. And I would be happy to be a part of um, other conversations with people that and engaging people in a way in which I think we can better each other. And so I appreciate you for getting me onto your podcast and asking me questions and sincerely engaging. And that's what we're being called to do is to talk about subjects that are challenging and hopefully get people to begin to question what they see and lead them to truth, which truth is God. So that's the whole idea, right?
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Brad, so much. I hope you have a great rest of your evening, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
All right. Thank you, Natalie. You have a wonderful evening as well.
Bye.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Desert Wanderers. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up as well as subscribe down below. We're produced by Salt and Light Radio, so you can find us on social platforms at Salt and Light Radio or Desert Wanderers Podcast. We produce episodes every week and we launch them for you on Wednesdays, so make sure to tune in for next week's episode and we'll see you then.